Chapter 1. The Night I Stopped Being a Father. Christmas Eve always smelled like cinnamon and pine in our house. That night was no different. I remember standing on the front porch for a moment before going inside, holding a small brown paper bag from the bakery downtown. Sarah liked their gingerbread cookies. The boys liked anything shaped like a snowman. I had been careful to get extra icing. Through the living room window, I could see the Christmas tree glowing gold against the dark. Adam's crooked star leaned slightly to the left at the top. Ethan had insisted it looked more artistic that way. 13 years of Christmases. I stepped inside quietly. "Dad!" Adam's voice floated from the hallway. "In here," Sarah answered quickly. Her tone made me pause. It wasn't warm. It wasn't festive. It was controlled. I set the cookies on the kitchen counter and loosened my tie. I hadn't planned to eavesdrop. I never had before. But something in her voice made me slow my steps as I walked toward the hallway. The boys' bedroom door was half closed. Sarah stood just inside it. I could see her silhouette against the lamplight. Adam sat on the edge of his bed. Ethan leaned back against his pillows. "We need to talk about something important," Sarah was saying. "Important." My stomach tightened. "It's about Dad," Ethan said. Sarah inhaled softly. "It's about your father." I almost smiled. I expected some gentle speech about divorce, maybe. Things have been strained lately. I'd felt the distance. But then she said it. "Mike is your biological father." Silence. My heartbeat became so loud, I thought they would hear it in the room. Adam's voice came first. "Uncle Mike." "Yes." Ethan laughed nervously. "That's not funny, Mom." "I'm not joking." There was a rustle of blankets. I could imagine their faces. Confusion. Disbelief. "But Dad," Adam started. "Thomas isn't your biological father," she said carefully. "He's been raising you. But biologically, you're Mike's." The hallway felt smaller. The air felt thin. I leaned one hand against the wall to steady myself. 13 years. Every scraped knee. Every school pickup. Every fever at 2 in the morning. Every science fair. Every bedtime story. "My boys, why didn't you tell us?" Ethan asked. "Because the timing wasn't right," Sarah replied. "There are things you don't understand yet." "What things?" Adam demanded. "The house," she said. And then I heard the sentence that split my life in two. "Once the house is paid off, we'll tell him we want a divorce. It's better that way financially." The words landed slowly. "Once the house is paid off. So you're going to leave, Dad?" Ethan's voice cracked. "We'll break the news at Christmas," she continued, ignoring the tremor in his voice. "Everything will already be in place. The house, the accounts. Legally, it will be simple. Simple. 13 years reduced to paperwork. And then what?" Adam whispered. "Then we move in with your real father." Real father. My hand slipped slightly against the wall. "Does Dad know?" Ethan asked. "No," she said firmly. "And he doesn't need to. Not yet. He's comfortable. He trusts us. That's important. Comfortable. Trusting. Useful." Adam's voice was quiet now. "So what is he to us?" There was a pause. A long one. "He raised you," Sarah said finally. "And that matters. But biology is biology." I felt something inside me fold inward. Not break. Not explode. Fold. Because in that moment, rage would have been easy, but clarity was colder. I stepped back silently before she could open the door. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up the gingerbread bag. I placed it neatly beside the milk glasses I had poured earlier. My reflection in the microwave door looked the same. That was the strangest part. I didn't look like a man who had just stopped being a father. Sarah emerged from the hallway a minute later. She jumped slightly when she saw me. "Oh, you're home. Traffic," I said evenly. Her eyes searched my face. I smiled. The same smile I had given her for 13 years. "The boys excited for tomorrow?" I asked. "Yes," she said carefully. "Very. Good." Adam and Ethan came out a moment later. Their faces were pale. "Hey, Dad," Adam said. The word hit differently now. "Hey, champ." I clapped his shoulder. Ethan avoided my eyes. "Can we open one present tonight?" "Of course," I said. My voice didn't shake. We sat around the tree. Wrapping paper tore. Laughter tried to happen. I watched them closely. They kept glancing at Sarah. They kept glancing at me. I wondered what they were seeing. A lie? Or a man who had loved them without condition? Later, I stood in their doorway again. Their room smelled like detergent and peppermint. "Night, boys," I said. "Night," Ethan murmured. Adam hesitated. "Dad." "Yeah." He looked like he wanted to say something. Instead, he shook his head. "Nothing." I walked in anyway. I hugged Ethan first. He held on longer than usual. Then Adam. His shoulders felt tense. "I'm proud of you," I told them both. "For what?" Ethan asked softly. "For who you are." I turned off the light. In the hallway, the house hummed quietly. The refrigerator, the heater, the soft tick of the clock. 13 years rearranged themselves in my mind, like puzzle pieces turning over. Mike volunteering to be their godfather. Mike insisting on hospital visits when they were born. Mike laughing a little too easily at family dinners. Sarah defending him whenever I joked about him being around too much. The house, the mortgage, the account in my name, medical supply contracts I had signed without question because I trusted the people who handed them to me. Comfortable, trusting, useful. I walked into my office and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the wall. I opened my laptop. If she was waiting for the house to be paid off, that meant timing mattered. If timing mattered, so did paperwork. If biology was her weapon, legality would be mine. I pulled up the mortgage balance. I pulled up the business accounts. I pulled up every document with my signature. 13 years of marriage reframed in seconds. Not love, leverage, not partnership, positioning. The grief would come later. But that night, something colder took its place. I understood two things with absolute clarity. Love made me their father. But legally, I was being set up to lose everything. Chapter 2. The signature that wasn't mine. I didn't sleep. By 3:17 a.m., the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the hallway clock. Sarah lay on her side of the bed, breathing evenly. I watched the ceiling for a long time, replaying her voice in my head. Once the house is paid off, timing, money, paperwork, those are not emotional words. They were strategic ones. So I got up. I moved carefully so the mattress wouldn't shift. I walked to my office and closed the door without turning on the overhead light. The desk lamp cast a tight yellow circle over stacks of documents. Contracts, invoices, vendor agreements, medical device procurement forms. For 13 years, I had run compliance oversight for the hospital supply chain division. It was clean work, structured, predictable. I reviewed documents, verified numbers, signed approvals. I trusted my colleagues. I trusted Mike. I opened the latest contract file. Vendor, Allied Medical Distribution. Total cost, $4.8 million. I blinked. That number felt wrong. I pulled up last year's agreement for the same devices. $3.1 million. Same model. Same quantities. I leaned closer to the screen. The markup wasn't minor. It was massive. 40%. Maybe more. Maybe market fluctuation, I muttered. Except medical device pricing didn't jump like cryptocurrency. I opened 3 more contracts. Each one inflated. Each one approved. Each one bearing my signature. My stomach tightened. I scrolled down slowly and stared at the digital authorization block. Thomas Baker. The letters were mine. The curve of the T. The sharp cut of the B. But something was off. The tail of the R in Baker was slightly longer than I normally wrote it. A microscopic difference, but I had been signing documents for 20 years. You know your own name. I opened a document from 6 months earlier. Compared them side by side. The pressure points were different. The angles slightly skewed. A subtle distortion. Copied. Replicated. Not quite me. I printed both pages and laid them flat on the desk. I stared until the shapes blurred. Then I opened the internal audit portal. No flags. No compliance alerts. Everything green. That was impossible, unless the system itself had been bypassed or controlled. I leaned back slowly. My name was on every approval. My login credentials verified every submission, every inflated contract, every vendor payment. If fraud existed, and I was increasingly certain it did, it would lead straight to me. The perfect fall guy. Clean reputation. Stable marriage. Long-standing employee. No criminal history. Trusting. Comfortable. Useful. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was one name I hadn't spoken to in years. Laura Martinez. We met at a hospital fundraiser 6 years ago. She'd been introduced as a financial crimes detective. We'd exchanged polite conversation about regulatory loopholes and corruption in supply chains. She had sharp eyes, the kind that missed nothing. I hesitated only a moment before texting. Are you still in financial crimes? I need advice. Confidential. Her reply came 20 minutes later. Yes. 9 a.m. coffee? I didn't reply with details. Just an address. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and damp wool coats. It was quiet for a weekday morning. Lauren was already seated when I arrived. She hadn't changed much. Dark hair pulled back. Minimal makeup. Watchful expression. Thomas, she said, standing briefly. Detective. She smiled faintly. It's Lauren. I sat down across from her. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. She folded her hands. Tell me. I didn't mention Sarah. I didn't mention Mike. I kept it professional. I've been reviewing contracts in our medical supply division. I said evenly. There are pricing discrepancies. Significant ones. 40 to 60% inflation. All approved under my authorization. And I didn't authorize them. She didn't react immediately. Is your digital signature secure? She asked. It should be. Multi-factor authentication. Biometric verification. Should be, she repeated. I slid 2 printed contracts across the table. Look at the signatures. She examined them carefully. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Similar, she said. Not identical. No, she agreed. Not identical. She looked up at me. How many contracts are we talking about? Hundreds. Over several years. Her jaw tightened. Have any devices failed? She asked. I don't know. That's not a small detail. I leaned forward. What aren't you saying? She studied me for a long moment. Thomas, there's an ongoing federal investigation into counterfeit surgical devices entering regional hospital networks. The cafe noise seemed to dull. What kind of devices? I asked. Implants, monitoring equipment, cardiac components. My chest felt tight. We traced distribution to a handful of intermediaries, she continued. Layered shell vendors, offshore accounts. Someone inside compliance had to authorize the contracts. I stared at her. My name, I said quietly. She didn't confirm it verbally. She didn't have to. I exhaled slowly. How much? I asked. Rough estimate? Tens of millions. I felt the ground tilt. Are patients dead? I forced out. There have been complications, she said carefully. Device failures. Infections. We're still sorting causation. I looked down at the paper. My signature. My authority. My career. Do they suspect me? I asked. She held my gaze. Yes. The word landed without drama. Just fact. I sat back. I could see the outline now. Inflated contracts. Counterfeit devices. Internal authorization under my credentials. If it collapsed, I would collapse with it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you came to me first, she said. Which criminals rarely do. She tapped the paper lightly. These aren't sloppy forgeries. They're control variations. Someone with access to your patterns. I thought of shared office spaces. Shared networks. Shared passwords in moments of convenience. I thought of Mike. He had been around constantly. Business dinners. Strategic meetings. Who benefits? Lauren asked. Vendors, I said automatically. And I swallowed. Anyone positioned above compliance. She watched my face carefully. Thomas, she said quietly, who handles vendor relationships in your division? I hesitated, then answered. Mike Williams. Her pen stopped moving. And your relationship with him? Best friends, I said. The word felt sour. How long? Since before my sons were born. She didn't comment on that. Instead, she slid the contract back toward me. Your name is on everything, she said. Authorization, oversight, compliance clearance. I felt cold despite the heat in the cafe. If the investigation accelerates, she continued, you'll be the first door they knock on. So what do? I asked. Her eyes held mine steadily. You start documenting everything. Quietly. I nodded. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. There's something else. What? We believe whoever designed this structure intended for compliance to take the fall from the beginning. I stared at her. Why? Because compliance is trusted, she said. And when trust collapses, it distracts from architects higher up. The word echoed. Architects. I thought about last night. About strategic timing. About patience. About leverage. The pieces were aligning. Not just betrayal in my marriage, but something larger. Something calculated. Lauren studied me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You're not the architect. You're the shield." Chapter 3, 13 Years of Calculated Love. The DNA kit arrived in a plain brown envelope. No logo, no branding, just a barcode and sterile instructions. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at it while the coffee machine hissed behind me. Sarah was upstairs getting ready for work. The boys were arguing over whose turn it was to feed the dog. Normal sounds. Normal morning. I slid the envelope into my briefcase. "Dad, are you coming to the game Friday?" Ethan called from the hallway. "Wouldn't miss it," I said automatically. The words hurt in a way I couldn't describe. That evening, I told them we needed to update some medical records for school. Routine. Quick swabs. They didn't question it. Adam rolled his eyes. "You're always doing paperwork." "Occupational hazard," I replied with a faint smile. I swabbed the inside of their cheeks carefully. They trusted my hands. That was the unbearable part. Later, in the bathroom, I stared at my own reflection before swabbing my own cheek. My movements were steady. I sealed the envelopes. 3 samples. 3 truths. The results came back in 5 days. I opened the email alone in my office. Probability of paternity. 0%. The words didn't explode. They settled. Heavy. Permanent. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I thought about Adam's first steps across the living room carpet. Ethan's terror of thunderstorms when he was 4. The way they both used to crawl into my bed on Sunday mornings. Biology is biology, Sarah had said. Love had never needed a lab report. But now I had one, and it confirmed what I had already heard through a half-closed door. Mike Williams was their biological father. I didn't cry. Grief requires illusion. This was confirmation. That night, Sarah fell asleep with her phone charging on the nightstand. She always believed in passwords, but she also believed in predictability. Anniversary dates, birthdays, the boys' names. I tried combinations methodically. On the 3rd attempt, the screen opened. I felt something in me harden. I didn't scroll through photos. I didn't search for romantic exchanges first. I went to email. There were folders. Personal. Work. Archive. Deleted. I opened archive. The oldest message I could find from Mike was dated 14 years ago. Subject. Timing. My pulse slowed. I opened it. We need to be careful about dates. He tracks everything. If this lines up wrong, it could get messy. Sarah's reply. "I know. I'll handle it. Just trust me." 14 years ago, before the twins were born. I scrolled. There were hundreds of messages. Encrypted jokes. Late-night exchanges. Coordinated business trips. And then I found the one that made the room tilt. Subject. Positive. Sarah had written. "It worked. Doctor confirmed. Due date lines up perfectly with the conference weekend. He suspects nothing." Mike's reply. "That's why we chose him. Clean. Stable. Predictable. He'll never question it." The air left my lungs slowly. Chose him. Not fell in love with. Not drifted into betrayal. Chose. Like selecting a candidate for a position. I kept reading. Another message, months later. He cried when we told him. I almost felt bad. "Mike, don't. He'll be a great father." That's the point. I sat very still. 13 years of calculated love. They had time conception around my travel schedule. Timed announcements. Timed financial decisions. There were spreadsheets attached in one thread. Actual spreadsheets. Projected mortgage payoff timelines. Asset distribution forecasts. Estimated divorce settlement scenarios. I opened one. Column headers. Mortgage completion year. Equity projection. Thomas retirement fund. Liquidation strategy. At the bottom of one message, Mike had written, "Once the house is paid off, it's clean. We step in. He won't see it coming." The same sentence I had heard in the hallway. Not spontaneous. Rehearsed. I scrolled further. There were moments of intimacy between them that felt almost secondary compared to the logistics. Affection existed, but planning dominated. One message stopped me cold. "Sarah, sometimes I think he actually believes we're happy." "Mike, that's because he loves you." "Sarah, He loves us. That makes it easier. Mike. Exactly. I closed my eyes. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had used my loyalty as infrastructure, my clean reputation, my financial stability, my position in compliance. Every family dinner where Mike laughed too loudly. Every hospital fundraiser where he praised my integrity. Every toast to friendship. Layered deception. The affair hadn't been an accident. It had been architecture, and I was the foundation. I checked the earliest timestamp again. 14 years ago. Before the twins. Before the house. Before the life I thought we were building. The marriage itself had been strategic. I was never a husband in their story. I was an asset. I put the phone down carefully. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. Rage would have been simpler. But rage is impulsive. This required precision. I walked to the window and looked out of the backyard. The swing set still stood near the fence. The wood slightly weathered. I remembered assembling it in the summer heat while Sarah brought lemonade. I remember Mike stopping by that day, offering to help, laughing when I misaligned the bolts. Chosen. The word echoed again. They chose me because I was clean, because I was compliant, because I would never suspect, because I would never check, because I loved too fully. I turned back to the desk. I reopened the email thread and began forwarding everything to a secure encrypted account I had created earlier that week. Attachments, spreadsheets, audio files. There were even voice memos. One of them began with Mike's voice. We just have to keep him focused on work. As long as he's busy, he won't look too closely at anything. Anything. The contracts, the finances, the timing, the children. It wasn't just betrayal of the heart. It was strategic exploitation. I felt something shift inside me. The grief that had hovered in my chest since Christmas Eve began to thin. Not disappear. Transform. Grief asks why. Planning asks how. How they structured it. How they hid it. How they expected it to end. I stood up and walked to the mirror in my office. For a moment, I studied my reflection. They believed I would never question. They believed I would never look. They believed love made me blind. They misunderstood something fundamental. Love makes you generous. It does not make you incapable. I returned to the desk and organized the files into folders. Evidence, timeline, financial projections. I printed key emails and placed them in a manila envelope. 13 years of calculated love. Not romance, not passion, calculation. And for the first time since that hallway conversation, I felt no tremor in my hands. No confusion, no denial. I stopped grieving the marriage. Now I plan. Chapter 4, The Woman They Tried to Silence. Rebecca Williams called me at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stared at her name on the screen longer than necessary. For a second, I considered not answering. Mike's wife. The other half of the illusion. I pressed accept. Thomas. Her voice was steady but thin, like it had been stretched too tight. Yes. A pause. We need to talk. In person. I said nothing. She inhaled slowly. I know about the contracts. That got my attention. Where? I asked. We met at a botanical garden on the edge of the city. Neutral ground. Open air. Few people. Rebecca sat on a bench near the koi pond, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked composed. Almost too composed. When I approached, she didn't smile. You look tired, she said. So do you. That's fair. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Two people who had attended the same dinner parties, shared the same holidays, sat across from each other at Thanksgiving while our spouses passed the wine. I didn't know how to start this conversation, she said finally. Start with the truth. She nodded once. I've known about the fraud for 3 years. The words landed softly, but heavily. You knew, I repeated. Yes. And you didn't report it. I couldn't. I felt anger rise, but I held it. Why? Because I didn't have enough. Not first. She looked out at the pond. And because I needed to understand how deep it went. How deep does it go? I asked. Her jaw tightened. Deeper than inflated contracts. She reached in her bag and pulled out a slim flash drive. She didn't hand it to me yet. I started noticing discrepancies 3 years ago, she continued. Offshore transfers. Layered shell companies. Mike's travel that didn't align with conferences. Offshore accounts, I said quietly. Yes. How many? 6 that I confirmed. Cayman Islands. Luxembourg. Singapore. The names sounded clinical. International. Calculated. She finally extended the flash drive toward me. I copied everything I could access. Account statements. Vendor agreements. Audio files. Audio files? I asked. She met my eyes. Recorded conversations. A slow chill moved through me. You recorded your husband? Yes. Why? Her composure cracked slightly. Because I stopped trusting him. There it was. The fracture line. I took the flash drive, but didn't pocket it yet. What changed? I asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, I tried to have a child. The koi rippled the surface of the pond. I assumed it just wasn't happening, she continued. So I scheduled tests. Routine fertility screening. Her voice became clinical. They told me I had been sterilized. The words didn't process at first. What? I said. Tubal ligation. Surgical. Documented. Performed 5 years ago. My throat tightened. You didn't consent? No, the air between us shifted. He told the doctor I had requested it, she said. There were forged signatures. Forgery. The word echoed in my mind. Contracts. Approvals. Signatures. They show me the paperwork, she continued. My name. My authorization. Just like yours. I stared at her. Why would he? So I couldn't complicate his future, she said flatly. So I wouldn't ask questions about why he didn't want children. The implication hung between us. He already had them. She looked down at her hands. I confronted him, and he denied it. Gaslit me. Said I must have forgotten consenting during a previous procedure. Her voice trembled for the first time. I know what I agreed to. I know what I didn't. Anger flickered through me, not explosive but sharp. 3 years, I said. Yes. What have you gathered? She exhaled slowly. Financial transfers tied to counterfeit device shipments. Emails between shell vendors. Conversations where he references keeping compliance clean. Keeping compliance clean. Me. He said that. I asked. Yes. My pulse slowed into something colder. Does he know you have this? I asked. No, does Sarah? Her lips pressed thin. I didn't know about Sarah until recently. So she hadn't known the full betrayal either. We were both married to ghosts, she said quietly. For a moment, there was no sound but water moving. Why come to me now? I asked. She looked at me directly. Because you're about to take the fall. I didn't respond. I saw internal chatter, she continued. Regulatory audits accelerating. Your name mentioned in board discussions. So you're warning me. I'm aligning with you. The distinction mattered. Why? I asked again. Because I don't want revenge, she said. I want accountability. Her voice steadied. What he did to me, what they've done to patients, that's not an affair. That's systemic harm. I studied her carefully. You're willing to testify? Yes. Publicly, if necessary. Against him? Yes. No hesitation. I nodded once. I've already spoken to someone, I said carefully. Law enforcement? Yes. Good. She didn't ask who. Instead, she leaned back slightly. I was the quiet wife, she said. The supportive one. The one who smiled at Gallus. No one paid attention. They tried to silence you, I said. Yes. But they underestimated you. Her mouth curved faintly. Not a smile. Recognition. They underestimated you too. I thought about the emails. The spreadsheets. The word chosen. We were selected for our usefulness, I said. And now, she asked. Now, they've miscalculated. We sat there for a long moment. Then I took out my phone. I'm calling her. Rebecca nodded. Lauren answered on the second ring. Martinez. I have someone you need to meet, I said. There was a pause. Bring her, Lauren replied. That afternoon, the three of us sat in a private conference room at Lauren's precinct. Rebecca laid out printed statements, highlighted transfers, time-stamped recordings. Lauren listened without interruption. When Rebecca described the sterilization, Lauren's pen stopped mid-note. Did you file a medical malpractice report? Lauren asked. No, Rebecca said. I needed proof of intent first. Lauren nodded slowly. You understand what this means? She asked both of us. Yes, I said. Rebecca's voice was firm. It means this doesn't end quietly. Lauren looked from one to the other. For the record, she said, you're both stepping into something that will become public. I know, Rebecca replied. I know, I echoed. Lauren closed her folder. Then we moved carefully. The room felt different now. Not suffocating. Strategic. 3 people aligned. 3 people who had been underestimated. As we stood to leave, Rebecca looked at me. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "you were a good father." I didn't trust myself to answer immediately. "Still am," I said finally. She nodded. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, since the DNA report, since the forged signatures and calculated emails, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, not vindication, presence. I was no longer standing in the hallway alone, listening to my life unravel. For the first time, Thomas was not alone. Chapter 5, Building the Trap in Silence. Revenge is loud. Justice is quiet. I chose quiet. The attorney's office smelled like leather and lemon polish. Framed degrees lined the wall behind him, arranged with deliberate symmetry. "An irrevocable trust?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "That's permanent, Thomas. Once executed, you can't reverse it." "That's the point," I said. He studied me for a long moment. "Your sons are minors. This would transfer the house, investment portfolios, and liquid reserves directly into the trust. You would no longer own them. I understand. And your wife? She won't." His pen hovered over the draft paperwork. "You're certain?" "Yes." I had never been more certain of anything in my life. We structured it carefully. The house, the retirement accounts, the brokerage investments, even the vacation property Sarah had insisted on buying 3 years earlier. Everything transferred into an irrevocable trust under Adam and Ethan's names. Primary trustee, Detective Lauren Martinez. He raised an eyebrow at that. "She's financially literate," I said evenly. "And impartial. Your wife won't contest this?" "She can try." He nodded slowly and began typing. "Conditions?" he asked. "Yes." I had thought about that carefully. "Funds are released incrementally at age 21, I said, "but only if they maintain a GPA of at least 3.5 in college or vocational training." The attorney nodded approvingly. "And behavioral stipulations?" "No felony convictions. No financial misconduct. No documented academic dishonesty." He paused. "You're building safeguards. I'm building structure." I didn't tell him why. The paperwork took 2 weeks to finalize. I signed where indicated. Each signature felt deliberate. Not forged. Not manipulated. Mine. When it was done, the attorney slid the folder toward me. "It's legally airtight," he said. "That's the intention." Lauren met me in her office that evening. "You're sure you want me listed as trustee?" she asked. "Yes. You trust me with that much control over their future?" "I trust your integrity." She didn't smile. "This won't be easy for them," she said. "It's not supposed to be." She leaned back in her chair. "You're thinking long-term. I don't have the luxury of short-term." She nodded once. "Then I accept." At home, I moved carefully. Not emotionally. Strategically. I started small. "Adam," I said one evening at dinner, "what's the difference between an asset and a liability?" He blinked. Assets make money. Liabilities cost money." "Correct," I said. "And which do you want more of?" "Assets," Ethan said confidently. "Why?" "Because they build wealth." I nodded. "Exactly." Sarah glanced at me. "What's this about?" "Financial literacy," I said calmly. "They're old enough." I began involving them in small decisions. Grocery budgeting, electricity usage, interest rates, compound interest. I told them one Saturday morning, sketching on a notepad, is either your best friend or your worst enemy. Depends on which side you're on. Adam leaned closer. "How do you make it your friend?" "Discipline." Ethan smirked. "You're turning us into accountants." "I'm turning you into men who can't be manipulated." The words slipped out before I could soften them. Sarah's fort paused midair. I smiled lightly. In business. But the lessons stayed. I taught them how to change a tire, how to fix a leaking faucet, how to read a contract carefully before signing. "Never sign something you haven't fully read," I told them one afternoon in my office. "Even if you trust the person?" Adam asked. Especially then, at night when the house was quiet, I recorded videos. I set up a small camera on my desk. The red light blinked on. For a long moment, I simply looked into the lens. "Hi, boys," I said softly. I recorded one for their high school graduation, another for college acceptance. One for the day they might get married. If she respects you, I said into the camera, you'll never have to shrink yourself to keep her. My voice stayed steady. Another for heartbreak. Pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you cared. One for the birth of their children. If you're holding your child right now, I said quietly, remember that fatherhood isn't biology. It's presence. That one took 3 attempts. I labeled each file carefully. Graduation, Adam. Graduation, Ethan. Wedding. First child. I encrypted them and uploaded copies to secure storage. Then I saved backups on physical drives. Redundancy matters. The 3 envelopes sat on my desk one night. Thick. Heavy. Envelope 1. DNA results and a letter explaining everything without venom. Envelope 2. Evidence of fraud. Printed emails. Offshore account summaries. Voice transcript excerpts. Envelope 3. Trust documents. Asset transfer confirmation. Trustee designation. I wrote their names carefully on each. Adam. Ethan. My handwriting did not shake. One evening, Ethan lingered in the kitchen after Sarah went upstairs. Dad. Yeah. He hesitated. If something big changes, would you tell us? I studied him carefully. Why do you ask? He shrugged. Just feels like something's different lately. He wasn't wrong. I rested my hand on his shoulder. If something changes, I said, I promise you won't be unprepared. He nodded slowly. That seemed to satisfy him. The mortgage statement arrived in the mail the week before Christmas. Final payment scheduled. Sarah smiled when she opened it. Finally, she said, no more debt. No more debt, I echoed. The house felt different that night. Lighter, but not in the way she imagined. I retrieved the boxes of ornaments from the attic. Adam carried the tree into the living room. Ethan complained about the artificial branches shedding. Sarah played holiday music. I plugged in the lights and watched them flicker on. Warm, golden, familiar. I handed Adam the star. Same spot. I asked. He grinned. Crooked, crooked. We laughed softly. I hung ornaments slowly, each one a memory. Handmade paper snowflakes. Clay handprints from kindergarten. The small wooden tray Mike had given them one year. I paused with that one in my hand. Then I hung anyway. Not because it belonged, but because truth does. Sarah stepped back, admiring the tree. It's perfect, she said. I looked at the lights glowing against the dark windows. I adjusted one ornament slightly. Perfect alignment. Perfect timing. Perfect silence. I decorated the Christmas tree, knowing it was the last one. Chapter 6, Christmas morning. I woke at 4:12 a.m. The house was silent in the way only Christmas morning can be, heavy with anticipation, wrapped in darkness and artificial pine. For a moment, I lay still between memory and decision. Then I sat up. Sarah slept on her side, one hand tucked under her pillow. Peaceful, unaware that the timing she had calculated so carefully had already shifted. I stood, dressed quietly, and walked to my office. The 3 envelopes were stacked neatly on my desk. Adam, Ethan, Sarah. I picked them up one by one, feeling their weight. DNA results and a letter written with outrage. Evidence, emails, financial transfers, recordings transcribed in ink. Trust documents, notarized, sealed, irreversible. I walked to the living room. The Christmas tree glowed softly in the dark, gold lights reflecting against the window. The crooked star leaned slightly left, just as it always had. I placed the envelopes beneath the tree. Not hidden, not dramatic, visible. I hesitated only once. Then I slid the DNA results halfway out of Adam and Ethan's envelope, so the first page was unmistakable. Probability of paternity, 0%. Truth shouldn't require digging. I stepped back and studied the scene. It looked almost peaceful. That was the irony of well-planned endings. They looked calm. I took one final look around the room, the couch where we had watched movies, the rug where the boys had built Lego cities, the kitchen entrance where Sarah had once laughed at something I said. Then I left. No slammed doors. No confrontation. Just a quiet closing of the front door at 4:37 a.m. The air outside was cold. My breath visible. I did not look back. At 7:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. Sarah. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then again. I turned it face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. Later, Lauren would tell me what happened next. but I could imagine it vividly. Adam was the first awake. He always was on Christmas. He would have padded down the hallway in socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He would have stopped short when he saw the envelopes. "Mom," he likely called. Sarah would have come down moments later, irritated but composed. "What is it?" Her eyes would have landed on the handwriting. Her face would have drained. "Don't open those," she might have said. Too late. Adam would have pulled the papers free. Ethan behind him, leaning over his shoulder. Silence. "What is this?" Ethan asked. Sarah stepping forward quickly. "Give me that." But Adam didn't. He kept reading. Lauren later told me Sarah's hand was shaking so badly she tore the corner of the envelope trying to grab it. "You opened it?" she had snapped. "It has our names on it," Adam replied. The calm in his voice unsettled her. Then she saw the second envelope, the one addressed to her. She opened it first. Email printouts spilled onto the floor. Highlighted sections. Spreadsheets. Offshore accounts. The words she had written in secret now printed in black ink. Once the house is paid off, she reportedly sat down hard on the couch. "This isn't real," she whispered. Adam and Ethan were still reading. "What does biological father mean?" Ethan asked quietly. Sarah's voice broke. It means Uncle Mike is our dad," Adam said, finishing the sentence without looking up. Silence filled the room. Then Adam said, something Lauren repeated to me word for word. "He raised us. That makes him our dad." Sarah looked at him as if she didn't recognize him. "You don't understand," she said desperately. This was complicated. Ethan flipped to the trust documents. "What's this?" he asked. Sarah grabbed the pages and scanned them quickly. "Irrevocable. Assets transferred. Trustee, Lauren Martinez." Her breathing reportedly became shallow. "No," she whispered. "He can't do this." But he had. At 8:02 a.m., the doorbell rang. Not carolers, not neighbors, federal agents, FDA Task Force, and Financial Crimes Division. Lauren stood behind them. Calm, controlled. "Mrs. Baker," one of the agents said evenly, "we have a warrant." Sarah's voice rose. "This is ridiculous." "My husband is cooperating," Lauren interrupted. The word hung in the air. Cooperating. Agents moved through the house efficiently. Computers seized. Phones collected. File cabinets opened. Adam and Ethan stood together near the staircase. Watching. Not crying. Not shouting. Watching. At 9:17 a.m., Mike called Sarah's phone. An agent answered instead. "Yes," he said flatly. "He's being detained as well." Bank alerts began pinging. Accounts frozen. Access denied. Lauren later told me Sarah's composure fractured in visible stages. Denial. Anger. Panic. "You can't do this," she screamed at one point. "This is his fault. Thomas did this." Lauren didn't react. "No," she said quietly. "Thomas prevented this." By early afternoon, both Sarah and Mike were in custody. Charges: fraud, conspiracy, distribution of counterfeit medical devices. 15 years of planning undone in hours. By evening, the house was quieter than it had ever been. Lauren sat across from the boys at the dining table. They had finished reading everything. Adam looked older somehow. Ethan's jaw was set tight. "You can stay here," Lauren told them. "The trust ensures that." Adam shook his head slowly. "He knew," he said. "Yes," Lauren replied. "And he still protected us." "Yes." Ethan looked up. "Where is he?" Lauren hesitated. "Safe." Adam folded the DNA report carefully. "He didn't leave because we weren't his," he said quietly. "He left because they tried to use him." Lauren nodded once. The boys looked at each other. No argument. No confusion. Just understanding. By nightfall, their biological father was in federal custody. Their mother was processing through booking. The house belonged to them, and the man who had raised them had vanished before dawn. But when Lauren asked gently, "Do you have questions?" Adam answered first. "Yeah." She waited. "When can we talk to Dad?" The boys choose Thomas, not biology. Chapter 7. Collapse and Sentencing. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and old paper. I sat in the last row, hat pulled low, glasses I didn't need resting on my face. No one looked twice at me. That was the advantage of vanishing before the narrative caught up. At the front of the room, Mike Williams no longer looked like the confident executive who once toasted to integrity in leadership. He looked smaller, contained. Sarah sat 2 seats away from him, her posture rigid, eyes forward, jaw clenched as if defiance alone could alter outcomes. The indictment had been unsealed 3 months earlier. Fraud, conspiracy, distribution of counterfeit medical devices, financial manipulation across state and international lines. The courtroom filled daily, reporters, hospital administrators, families of patients who had received faulty implants. And on the first morning of testimony, the prosecution did something strategic. They showed the emails, projected large on a screen. Sarah's words, Mike's replies. Once the house is paid off, a ripple moved through the room. Not because of the affair, but because of the calculation. The prosecutor, a calm woman with precise diction, addressed the jury. This was not impulsive misconduct, she said. This was architecture, a long-term financial structure built on counterfeit medical devices and positioned to collapse onto one individual, Thomas Baker. My name echoed in the room. Mike's attorney stood. Objection. Mr. Baker is not on trial. Correct. The prosecutor replied evenly. Because Mr. Baker reported the irregularities. A subtle shift occurred in the courtroom that day. The narrative tilted. I was no longer the suspect, quietly clear behind closed doors. I was the whistleblower. Lauren took the stand on the 3rd day. She was composed, factual, unflinching. Detective Martinez, the prosecutor asked, who initiated contact with you regarding financial discrepancies? Thomas Baker, she answered. And at that time, was he aware he was under internal suspicion? No. And what did he provide? Documented contracts, signature comparisons, and voluntarily submitted electronic devices for forensic review. Mike stared at the table. Sarah didn't look up. Then Rebecca testified. The room stilled when she described the sterilization. Gasps echoed faintly from the gallery. You're saying, the prosecutor clarified, that your husband authorized a medical procedure on you without consent? Yes. And forged your signature? Yes. Why? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Because children would complicate his long-term plan. Silence swallowed the room. The financial records followed. Offshore accounts displayed on screen. Layered shell corporations. Wire transfers routed through jurisdictions designed to obscure ownership. Experts testified that the devices sold to hospitals were counterfeit or substandard replicas, cheaper materials, compromised safety standards. One cardiologist described a failed implant. I trusted the supply chain, he said quietly. We all did. That phrase made headlines. We trusted the supply chain. The defense tried to frame the operation as a misunderstanding of vendor vetting. But the recordings dismantled that argument. Mike's voice, clear and unmistakable. As long as compliance signs were insulated. The prosecutor paused the audio there. Compliance, she said to the jury, was Thomas Baker, and then she let the implications settle. He was the shield, but he stepped aside before the collapse. Media coverage intensified as the trial progressed. By week 2, my name was trending in financial crime reporting circles. Internal whistleblower prevents larger medical scandal. Compliance officer uncovers fraud network. My photograph surfaced briefly, taken from an old hospital gala. But I had already disappeared from my former residence. No interviews, no statements, no public appearance. Lauren later told me reporters had knocked on the twins' door repeatedly. They declined to speak. Smart boys. On the final day of testimony, Sarah took the stand in her own defense. She claimed emotional manipulation. She claimed ignorance of the full scope of the counterfeit devices. But the emails contradicted her, highlighted projections, divorce timing, financial extraction scenarios. Did you write this? The prosecutor asked, holding up a printed message. Sarah's voice was tight. Yes. And what did you mean by clean exit? Silence. No further questions. Mike did not testify. When the jury returned, the room felt electrically tense. Guilty on all counts. Mike's shoulders slumped for the first time. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later. The judge spoke carefully, methodically. Mr. Williams, he began, You orchestrated a scheme that compromised patient safety and attempted to place responsibility on an uninvolved party. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. 15. No reaction from Mike. Mrs. Baker, the judge continued, you knowingly participated in financial conspiracy and fraud. You exploited trust for personal gain. This court sentences you to 8 years. 8. Sarah inhaled sharply. Behind them, Rebecca sat alone. Not triumphant. Resolved. Within a month, Rebecca filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. Financial misconduct. Medical abuse. Her settlement excluded all fraudulent proceeds. She later testified before regulatory committees. What began as a criminal trial evolved into policy reform. Medical device oversight protocols were rewritten. Multi-layer authentication requirements for compliance approvals. Independent third-party verification for vendor sourcing. Mandatory whistleblower protection expansions. Industry analysts began referring to the new framework as the Baker Protocol. I saw the term first in a regulatory journal online. Baker Protocol. Enhanced compliance safeguards following federal counterfeit device case. It felt surreal. My name attached, not to scandal, but to reform. Lauren called once after sentencing. It's done, she said. I know. You could speak publicly. No. You'd clear your reputation entirely. That's already happened. There was a pause. What will you do now, she asked. I looked out at the unfamiliar skyline beyond the apartment window. I'll do what I should have done sooner, I said quietly. Live deliberately. The media cycle moved on within weeks. New scandals. New headlines. The twins remained in the house, now legally theirs. Trust intact. Future secured. Mike began serving 15 years. Sarah began serving 8. Rebecca began rebuilding. And I packed what little I had taken with me into a single suitcase. No farewell speech. No public redemption arc. No final interview. I erased social media accounts. Closed old email addresses. Transferred remaining personal funds into anonymous holdings. By the time the world finished reframing me as a whistleblower, I was already gone. Thomas Baker disappeared completely. Chapter 8. 6 years of silence. Barcelona smells like salt and stone in the mornings. 6 years had passed, but the sea still surprised me. From the balcony of my small apartment in Elborn, I could see a narrow slice of the Mediterranean if I leaned just far enough over the railing. The buildings were older than the country I'd left behind. Worn brick, iron balconies, laundry lines stretching across alleys like quiet flags of survival. No one here knew my history. I was Thomas Baker only on paper. To the cafe owner downstairs, I was Tomas, the quiet American who read too much and tipped well. I woke early every day. Routine had replaced chaos. Coffee, a walk along the harbor, reading financial journals, volunteering twice a week, teaching basic accounting at a community center. No headlines, no courtrooms, no whispered conversations. Silence had become a discipline. But silence does not erase memory. Sometimes when I pass fathers walking with sons along Barceloneta Beach, something in my chest tightened. Ada will be 19 now. Ethan too. Second year university students. Men. I never allowed myself to check social media. I had erased that reflex. But I knew Lauren would contact me if something mattered. She always did. The message came on a Wednesday. I'm in Barcelona. Coffee? No greeting. No explanation. Just coordinates. I arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe overlooked Placa Rail, its arches framing afternoon light. Musicians tuned guitars near the fountain. Tourists took photographs, unaware of the weight conversations sometimes carried. Lauren walked in wearing a navy blazer and the same steady expression she had worn in court years ago. "Detective," I said as she approached. She smiled faintly. Still, some habits don't fade. We shook hands. There was no embrace. We had never been sentimental. "You look settled," she observed as she sat down. "I am." She studied me for a moment, as if measuring the truth of that. 6 years, she said. "Yes. They've grown." I kept my voice level. I assumed they would. She didn't rush. Instead, she ordered coffee in careful Spanish before turning back to me. "They're valedictorians," she said. The words hit harder than I expected. "Both." Yes. A quiet breath escaped me. Adam is majoring in law. Ethan in biomedical engineering. I nodded slowly. They speak at graduation next month. I folded my hands on the table to keep them steady. Do they? I stopped myself. Lauren understood anyway. They kept the house exactly as you left it. My eyes lifted. The swing set. I asked before I could stop myself. Still there? They refinished it last summer. A small smile threatened. And the tree ornaments? I asked quietly. They're boxed in the attic. Same labels. Same handwriting. For a moment, Barcelona faded. They never changed your office, she continued. Your books are still arranged by category. I let that settle. They could have remodeled, I said. They didn't want to. The coffee arrived. Neither of us touched it immediately. Lauren leaned forward slightly. They watched the videos. I looked at her. Before major decisions, she clarified. Adam watched the graduation one before accepting his internship. Ethan watched the heartbreak one last year. My chest tightened. He had a girlfriend, she said softly. It ended badly. And he said your words helped. I looked down at the table. I wasn't there, I said quietly. You were, she corrected. We sat in silence for a moment. They don't blame you, she added. I didn't respond immediately. Not once. I asked. Not once. How can you be sure? Because I asked them directly. I looked up. What did they say? Lauren's voice was calm. Adam said, he didn't leave us. He left the situation. The plaza noise blurred again. And Ethan, he said, Dad doesn't run. He prepares. Dad. The words sat between us. They call you that, Lauren said gently. I'm not their biological, I know. I stopped. She continued. They refer to Mike by his first name. Always. I swallowed. They understand what happened, she said. More than you think. A guitarist began playing softly near the fountain. I thought disappearing would protect them, I admitted. It did. But it cost you, she said evenly. Not them. I looked out at the plaza. 6 years of quiet mornings. 6 years of absence. I miss birthdays, I said. Yes. Graduations. Yes. But they never questioned why. She shook her head. They told me something else. What? They said you trusted them to become men. I let that settle. Trust, not abandonment. Lauren finally picked up her coffee. They're proud of you, she said. That's not how it's framed publicly. I'm not talking about the media. I leaned back in my chair. For years, I had carried a quiet doubt. Had I walked away too completely? Had silence been selfish? But Lauren's words rearranged something. They've applied your principles, she continued. Financial literacy, ethical reasoning, strategic thinking. I almost smiled. They argue like lawyers already. That would be Adam. And Ethan questions everything. Good. They asked about you recently, she added. What did you tell them? That you're safe. That you think about them. She studied my reaction. I didn't tell them where. Good. She nodded. They didn't press. We sat quietly for a while longer. The plaza shifted into early evening. Shadows lengthened across the arches. They're men now, Lauren said softly. Not boys. I nodded. And they know exactly who raised them. I closed my eyes briefly. For years, I had replayed that early morning departure. The envelopes beneath the tree. The quiet click of the door. I had told myself it was necessary. Strategic. Protective. But doubt lingers in silence. Lauren stood after finishing her coffee. I'll be at their graduation, she said. I know. She hesitated, then added, if you ever decide to reach out, not yet, I said gently. She didn't argue. As she turned to leave, she paused. One more thing. Yes. They still set the star crooked. A faint laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Good, I said. Lauren left the plaza, blending into the Barcelona crowd. I remained seated for a long time. The Mediterranean air drifted through the arches. Fathers walked past holding their sons' shoulders. And for the first time in 6 years, the silence inside me shifted. I hadn't lost them. I hadn't been erased. I hadn't abandoned them. I had prepared them, and they had chosen to carry that forward. Chapter 9, 10 years later. The ivy on the walls of Harvard Law School glistened with morning frost. Adam walked briskly across the campus, briefcase in hand, his robes tucked neatly beneath his coat. His mind was already parsing the day's docket. A medical fraud case involving a large hospital chain and faulty implant devices. The kind of case that could make or break public trust, but also the kind of case he had been preparing for his entire life without knowing it. He stopped for a moment outside the lecture hall, staring at the gargoyles perched above the entrance. They reminded him, oddly, of patience, of watching silently, waiting for the moment to act. A message pinged on his phone. Lauren, they're about to vote on Mike's parole. Be ready. Adam's jaw tightened. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he drafted his submission to block the parole. Evidence meticulously compiled, timelines verified, ethical arguments written. Every document, every note, every recording lined up like chess pieces he had been moving for years. Meanwhile, across town in Baltimore, Ethan walked briskly down the sterile corridors of Johns Hopkins Hospital. His lab coat crisp, ID badge swinging, tablet in hand. He had spent the last decade pushing patient safety reforms, speaking at conferences, and drafting policies that ensured ethical compliance for every medical device supplier. Dr. Baker, his colleague greeted. The committee wants your input on the new ethics guidelines for surgical implants. Ethan nodded, calm but precise. I'll review them. Ensure patient risk assessment is mandatory for every device. And make whistleblower protections clear. He paused for a moment, thinking of how far he'd come, how the lessons his father had embedded subtly, through careful guidance and those recorded videos, had made him capable of thinking critically and independently. That evening, Adam and Ethan sat together in a small apartment in D.C., drafting a joint statement. They wanted it public, not to punish, but to set the record straight. Adam typed, "Blood doesn't make a father. Love does." Ethan added, "We were given a choice to forgive, to learn, and to lead. Our father made sure we were prepared." They sent the letter to major newspapers, law journals, and online platforms. Within hours, it was trending. Social media exploded. Stories recast Thomas Baker as the quiet hero, the man who had prepared his sons for life when he couldn't be physically present. On the same day, the parole board convened to decide Mike Williams' release. Adam presented the evidence. Unrepentant manipulation, documented fraud, sterilization without consent, and the ongoing risk to patients. He spoke clearly, legally, unflinchingly. Minutes later, the board denied parole. Mike remained incarcerated. Adam exhaled, a small, precise victory in the chaos of decades-long scheming. Across the globe, Rebecca Williams Foundation received recognition at an international healthcare conference. She spoke eloquently about patient advocacy, ethical oversight, and protecting vulnerable individuals in the medical system. Photos circulated worldwide, showing her at podiums, shaking hands with dignitaries, and mentoring young advocates. "Rebecca," Adam said during a video call, "your work, it's making a global impact. You've turned what happened into something meaningful." Rebecca smiled, her face lined with years of struggle and triumph. "We couldn't let what they did define us. We had to define the system instead." Meanwhile, Sarah Baker's release from prison was met with indifference. Former colleagues avoided her calls. Job applications were rejected almost immediately. Friends had moved on. Isolation became her daily companion. She wandered the house she once planned to take for herself, now empty of her influence and her claims. The life she had meticulously constructed had collapsed around her. Adam and Ethan named their daughter's Joy. Adam cradled his newborn daughter in his arms, whispering, "Your grandfather may be a man of deceit, but you have something better, a family built on love, integrity, and protection." Ethan, visiting shortly after with his daughter, echoed the sentiment. "We may not share the same blood, but we share the lessons that matter most. You will grow up knowing right from wrong and what it means to stand for justice." Even with new lives and new responsibilities, the memory of their father's planning never faded. They still watched the milestone videos before big decisions, graduations, job offers, personal crises, absorbing his guidance silently but deliberately. Media outlets occasionally tried to reach Thomas, the now legendary whistleblower. Every story concluded with the same line: He vanished after protecting his family and safeguarding the public. No one could find him. His location remained secret. His influence was felt, but his presence was absent, exactly as he intended. Adam walked into the DOJ office one morning, greeted by a junior attorney. "Mr. Baker, congratulations on the latest case settlement. The hospital network has agreed to overhaul its entire compliance program." Adam nodded. "It's not just a settlement. It's a standard for patient safety now, and it's our responsibility to make sure it lasts." Ethan's phone buzzed simultaneously. The ethics committee had approved his proposal for an international reporting standard on medical device failures. A small, satisfied smile crossed his face. "The system will be better because we were careful," he whispered to himself. That night, the brothers exchanged messages. "Adam, Joy is asleep. She's so peaceful." "Ethan, same here. You know what she'll learn first? What love and preparation really mean." "Adam, exactly. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does." And in that moment, the circle felt complete. Somewhere, far from headlines, Thomas sat in silence. He did not intervene, did not reveal himself. He had given them autonomy, wisdom, and the foundation to lead meaningful lives. The public story praised him as a hero, but he needed no recognition. His sons were thriving. His legacy, built on careful planning and quiet sacrifice, had taken root. Sarah lived in isolation, grappling with her failures. Mike remained in federal prison, his schemes dismantled and his influence extinguished. Meanwhile, the twins flourished, each leading, each guiding, each creating a life shaped by love, ethics, and preparation rather than inheritance or genetics. And in small, private ways, the lessons of their father, Thomas Baker, continued to guide them. Mike Williams remained in prison. Chapter 10, The Definition of a Father. The first light of dawn spilled over the rooftops of Barcelona, painting the terracotta tiles and narrow alleyways in muted gold. I stood on my balcony, a thin blanket draped over my shoulders, breathing in the crisp morning air. The Mediterranean glittered softly in the distance, waves lapping at the harbor docks, as if keeping time with some silent rhythm only I could hear. 10 years had passed since that Christmas morning, the one that had ended my life as I had known it and begun a life of deliberate absence. 10 years of silence, observation, reflection, and patience. I sipped my coffee slowly, the bitter warmth grounding me. My mind drifted through the memories, like a ledger of calculated entries. Betrayal, loss, strategy, love, and the quiet victories that no one would ever see. I thought of Sarah. Her face flashed in memory, confident, scheming, assured that her plan would succeed. The illusion of control she had clutched so tightly. I remembered the envelope I left beneath the Christmas tree, the one that quietly shifted the balance of power, the one that set her downfall in motion. Her betrayal had been sharp, precise, and intentional. 13 years of false security, of stolen moments, and covert manipulation. The realization had hit me like ice water. That night, hearing her plan to divorce me, to claim the house, to move in with Mike, it had been a fracture through the heart of everything I thought was real. And yet, it was not grief that had consumed me. It was strategy. I had thought carefully, measured every move, and transformed heartbreak into planning. My rage had been disciplined. My devotion, silent but deliberate. Every lesson I taught my boys, every envelope I placed, every trust document executed, it was part of a larger structure. A protective architecture that no betrayal could dismantle. Adam and Ethan. I closed my eyes and saw them clearly. Not as children anymore, but as men, capable, thoughtful, ethical, strong. They were the living proof that fatherhood is more than biology. The DNA test had been irrelevant in the end. What mattered was the guidance, the presence, the principles I had instilled from the shadows. Lauren's words echoed in my memory. "They still call you Dad." It was enough. More than enough. I remembered Rebecca, too, the quiet ally who had risked exposure to bring truth to light. She had turned her suffering into purpose, rebuilding a life around advocacy, ethics, and reform. The Baker Protocol had become standard. Medical devices were safer. Compliance was no longer optional. Integrity mattered again. And all because a few people had chosen patience over impulse. I poured the last of my coffee into the sink and leaned against the balcony railing. The streets below were waking slowly. A delivery truck rumbled past. A baker rolled dough in the corner cafe. Children chased each other across cobblestone streets. Life, ordinary and persistent, moved forward. For a long while, I allowed myself the rare luxury of satisfaction. Not triumph, not vengeance. Satisfaction, the knowledge that everything I had done, every measured risk, every quiet decision had achieved its purpose. I thought of the twins' letters, their public statement 10 years later. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does. They had lived that truth, and they had defined me by it. Not by headlines, not by my past identity, not by the fraud and chaos I had survived. Their actions, their achievements, and their moral compass had made my legacy. I did not need recognition. The world could label Thomas Baker a mystery, a whistleblower, or even an enigma. I had chosen anonymity. I had chosen safety, quiet, and the freedom to observe the world from a distance. I had chosen to let my sons define me through who they became, rather than who I had once been. The wind carried a faint smell of salt and bread from the harbor and the morning bakery. I breathed it in, thinking of all the mornings I had missed with Adam and Ethan. Birthdays, first heartbreaks, graduation speeches, weddings I would never attend. And yet in that distance, I had attended every one in spirit. My lessons had traveled across continents. My words had guided their choices. My principles had shielded them from the chaos that had once threatened to consume us all. I thought of Sarah's isolation, of Mike's continued incarceration. Justice had been served, swift, absolute, and silent. There had been no spectacle, no vengeful declaration. The law, the structure, and the evidence had done their work, leaving me free to step aside and let life unfold. My hand brushed the edge of the balcony, tracing the wrought iron as I looked down at the narrow street below. I wondered if my boys would ever walk here, if they would understand fully the depth of planning and patience required to build a legacy without fanfare. They would. They had. I leaned back and let the sun touch my face. It was gentle, warming, and forgiving like time itself. The city hummed below me, indifferent to my existence, yet carrying the echoes of choices made long ago. I reflected on the lessons of the past decade, that patience is power, that strategy can protect, and that the greatest victories are often unseen. That revenge fades, that wealth, titles, and public recognition mean nothing without character, and that fatherhood, real fatherhood, is chosen, not inherited. I smiled faintly, alone but complete. My children, my legacy, my principles, they thrive because I had acted deliberately, not impulsively. They had grown in love and guidance, while I had remained unseen. The wind shifted, carrying the soft sounds of a street musician playing a haunting tune on a guitar. I listened, absorbing the music as one might absorb truth. Notes stretched across the plaza below, steady and patient like the rhythm I had lived by. I sipped the last drop of cold coffee. I had no plans to return to the life I had abandoned. I had no desire to reclaim the name Thomas Baker in public. I didn't need to. My sons, my quiet architects of the future, were the proof of all that mattered. Their accomplishments, their moral compass, their love, these were my monuments, my recognition, my redemption. The sun had risen fully now, spilling light into every crevice of the city. I watched children begin their day, workers unfold their routines, and the ordinary miracles of life continue around me. And in that quiet, I felt a completeness I had never known in the chaos of betrayal and courtroom battles. Revenge had long since faded. Character remained. Legacy endured. And fatherhood, I realized fully, is an act of choice, not of chance, not of biology, not of circumstance. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the decade lift. For the first time, I allowed myself to stand still and simply exist in the morning light. I didn't lose my family that night. I built it,